Welcome to Never Again Is Now, a podcast about anti-Semitism. I'm Evelyn Marcus.
And I am Phyllis Simpler-Miller.
About 2 weeks before the current war in Israel broke out, a Palestinian literature festival was held at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. The festival featured numerous speakers infamous for their public and vehement anti-Semitic and anti-Israel statements and actions. Eyal Jacobi is a University of Pennsylvania senior studying political science and modern Middle East studies. He's also the Jewish student who met with the Penn Vice Provost for university life the day before the festival began. Eyal, welcome to our show, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I need to say two things here. First of all, this is a very personal podcast for me. I'm a Wharton grad alum. One of my daughters is a Penn College alum. So the news of this festival was very upsetting. But before we get to that, we need to take notice of what's happened in the last 3 days. And so Eyal has just come from an event that he's going to tell about. And also we want to know what's been the reaction on the campus since the news broke on Shabbat. Eyal, take it away.
Yeah, I was just usually more upbeat. I was just coming from a vigil for what has transpired for the past 3 days. And it was a vigil. We read the Mourner's Kaddish. We had Israeli Penn students speak about their families, their friends that are currently enduring all of everything that's going on in the news, but, not through a television screen, but, through their own eyes. And it was a very, very emotional and powerful event.
Was it held indoors or outdoors?
It was outdoors. So in the middle of Penn's campus, there's a love sign. I would say it's a very, when you think about Penn, you frequently think about the love sign as being kind of like the center of campus. So it was held at the love sign.
And was there any pushback from pro-Palestinians at the event?
There was no counter protest or anything like that. I know the Arab Student Society is having a similar event later in the day. I didn't know about that until I think it was the Chancellor of Diversity of Student Life mentioned how they're having a similar event. I found it to be a little bit inappropriate at an event that's mourning lives that were slaughtered for the past 3 days. It's my opinion. I think it was in poor taste. In my opinion, we weren't there mourning a war, advocating for war. We were there to mourn the women and children who are being held hostage and were axed to death. I just saw a story that 40 children were burned, and that's what we were there for. And I think it was a little bit inappropriate to include kind of as if you can compare one or the other.
So what has been going on campus since the news broke?
Since the news broke, I wouldn't say there's anything, big on campus. There's a club called Penn Against the Occupation on campus, which has been posting some, in my opinion, very distasteful, disgusting Instagram posts, kind of justifying the violence. It's a Penn-sponsored organization. They also held the Palestine Rights Festival. They were one of the co-sponsors. And I think you can kind of see a pattern on their end that they reposted a story. There was a
Seem to have frozen momentarily with our guest. Evelyn, do we want to talk a little bit about what this festival was that he's going to describe? It was a 2-day event right before Yom Kippur on campus. Yes.
Phyllis,
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying there's a swastika found on campus. The Hillel was broken into, and now you have students that are somehow justifying the mass murder of children and the rape of women. I mean, on any account, let's just discount, neglect the conflict at large and the tragedies that both sides have experienced. What we witnessed was barbaric, and anyone trying to justify it either does not care about the facts, or they're so caught up in this cycle of hate that they're not willing to call out something that is malignant and atrocious and should scare every single human being on the face of the earth. And it's honestly scary that these students are sponsored by Penn. It's a Penn sponsored organization, and they're walking on campus. They're in class with me, and I don't, do they view me as this or this? And I keep coming back to this, and I talk about this with my friends, is that if you truly cared about justice and human life, then you can call out whatever you think the atrocities that the Israeli government has committed to, let's say, pave the road for literal slaughter of children. But then at the same time, why are you not advocating for the 17 Nepali students that are currently held hostage? 10 of them were executed, so now there's only 7 hostages left.
Yes.
Why are you not calling upon their release? They have nothing to do with what you're calling settler colonialism. They are Nepali students who were taken by Hamas and being held hostage. So it's clearly not about human life. It's about a cycle of hate where you just neglect anything unless you agree with it.
Hale, what is what is the general opinion around you on campus, from students, from faculty, from administrators, Jewish,
Yeah.
non-Jewish?
So I transferred to Penn. I think I mentioned this to Phyllis. I went to Middlebury College, and I transferred because of anti-Semitism. We can get into it if you guys want.
Right. We had hoped to have time to talk about that. But
Yeah.
can you tell me when you transferred after 1 year, 2 years?
I transferred after my freshman year, after my door was vandalized. I was called a dirty Jew, and then there was red spray paint outside of my window.
Wait, can you stop for 1 minute? I know we have so many things to talk about. I just want to know in 2 sentences. And did the university do anything about this?
So no, this was, I filed so many things to the university. I mean, I Jewish pro bono lawyers involved, and in fact, the chief diversity officer openly stepped down because he felt like he mistreated the situation. So it wasn't the administration kind of cracking down. It was internal, I guess, internal guilt, I would say, that kind of caused any change. I mean, and I have all of this documented. I literally, so after my door was vandalized and I was called a dirty Jew, me and my really close friend at Middlebury, we bought a $6 bucket of chalk from the grocery store, and we wrote all over campus, statistics about Israel, statistics about Jews, and one of them was because all over campus people were calling Jews Nazis, like literally saying Jews were Nazis, not saying Israelis. They were saying Jews are Nazis.
So this is, let's be clear, 3 years ago, right?
3 years ago.
Okay, keep going.
And so I took in chalk, and in chalk I wrote, "I am not a Nazi. I'm a descendant of a Holocaust survivor." That was, quote, what was written down. And then I'm walking on campus the next day, and there's a huge puddle right in the middle of where I wrote this. So I look up at the sky, and I see not a single cloud in the sky. So I'm like, either it only rained in this one spot of 2 feet by 2 feet, or someone intentionally did it. And the next day, someone sent me a tweet that someone posted mocking the fact that, and literally in quotes, put "accidentally spilled my drink" on this white propaganda. And this, I sent the administration the tweet. So it's not like there needs to be an investigation. They had the name, they had who did it, they had what they did, and then they had what I wrote, and nothing was done. And then I just spoke to my rabbi at Middlebury last night, actually, just to find out that an Israeli flag was being stomped on by a group of students in the middle of campus yesterday.
Okay, so now you transfer to Penn, you think it's going to be much better because Penn has been known as a very good place for Jewish students. And now we come to the Penn Festival. So
No, Phyllis, I asked Eyal
Oh.
before you switched back to 3 years ago. I asked Eyal, what is the opinion you hear around you of the students at Penn now, Jewish, non-Jewish, about the war that is going on in Israel right now? What is the opinion you hear from faculty, from administrators? Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, definitely. So I've definitely kind of put my name out there in terms of what was going on with the Palestine Rights Literature Festival. And so I would say, like, around me at least, I don't really think people are like gonna, voice their true opinions about the situation. I haven't heard anything negative other than what I mentioned about Penn Against the Occupation, kind of supporting the violence and it's justified. In terms of faculty at this vigil, I maybe saw 10 faculty members present. I think it's a joke. I don't understand why there's 10 faculty members.
You mean there should be much more?
Yeah, I mean, there was a letter that was written by there was co-signed by 36 professors condemning the Hillel response to the Palestine Rights Literature Festival. Where are those 36 professors when Jews are being murdered and people are chanting "Gas the Jews" outside the Sydney Opera House? Where are they? There's a lack of consistency. There's a lack of care for students, unless you agree with them politically, apparently. And it's a disgrace. The professors are here to support the students. And for some reason, that's just not happening. The students are supporting the students. There was over 200 to 300 students there, all crying at the end of the event and hugging each other. And yet,
Jewish and non-Jewish.
Jewish and non-Jewish, 100%. And yet, where are the faculty? The only guess I have in terms of like good faith is faculty are terrified. There was a DP article, and you can look it up.
Daily Pennsylvanian is the student newspaper at Penn. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, and I think it has a quote from a faculty member or a student. So I think I'm conflating two things, and if it's the other one, then I'll say the example of the other one. But basically, it was a quote, and then the DP literally said, the professor student has asked us not to include the name out of fear of retaliation. And then there was another professor I spoke to. Again, I am not going to say who the name is because of fear out of retaliation to this professor, basically saying that if you speak your mind on certain issues like this, you will not get your next promotion.
Exactly. That's what I hear also all the time from friends who are professors at other universities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we don't have time to discuss it. It just goes beyond my understanding that in academic institutions, which they're constantly saying freedom of expression, First Amendment rights, that you are afraid to speak up.
But it's the reality, Phyllis.
I understand, but I just find it so difficult to grasp. But I still cannot understand why this 2-day festival, by the way, I want people to know that the way they wrote the word rights was WRITES, but when you say it, it says Palestinian rights. So I only call it the Palestinian Literature Festival because I am not going to keep repeating that expression. But I do want to now move on to this 2-day festival.
Yes. Eyal, can you give our listeners some background of this Penn Palestinian Literature Festival and which university centers or departments co-sponsored it?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm just going to say the kind of like the truth, not the perception of, or the reality. I know truth and reality are different, but people have different truths. So I think reality is what we can all agree to. It was a Palestinian literature event with over 120 speakers whose goal is to celebrate the expression of Palestinian culture through art, through writing, through poetry. The Penn departments, which sponsored it, were the Cinema and Media Studies Department, the Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations Department, the Middle East Center, which runs the Modern Middle East Studies major. And it's a little bit confusing, but for time's sake, there's 2 people in the Middle East Center, there's 2 people in the Modern Middle East Studies Department. Those 2 people are the same people. They wear 2 different hats. The Kelly Writers House, which is a writing center on Penn, and some student organizations were also involved, which I think included Penn Against the Occupation, Penn Law for Students and Justice in Palestine. Can't think of any more.
Yeah, I think it's important to clarify something, because I did have a conversation, I won't say with who, with the Kelly Writers House ahead of time. Some of these people were official sponsors and some were participants. Is that correct? Or was any distinction made? If you don't know that there was a distinction, then it wasn't a very big distinction.
I mean, there's a list on the Palestine Rights Literature Festival which says sponsors, and then the Kelly Writers House is one of the names on that list. So
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, that's interesting. That was when my conversation, that was not the way it was presented. So that's why I'm asking. Okay, go ahead.
In defense of the Kelly Writers House, though, I do want to note something, is that they also had the state of Pennsylvania flag or logo on their event, and the governor or one of the Senate, whoever in charge, gave them a cease and desist letter saying you cannot use our logo. We do not sponsor the, like, we are not a sponsor of this event. So I also do want to give the Kelly Writers House the benefit of the doubt, is that there were a lot of things that were very sneaky, which I'm sure we'll get into in the coming.
Okay, I suggest we don't go too much into the details of this because we have so many other questions about this literature event that happens about 2 weeks before this war broke out at Penn University. Could you please describe some of the people involved in the festival and the anti-Semitic background of these people?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to run through the list. It might take a while, but some notable names are Roger Waters, who I think is a household anti-Semitic name now. He dressed up over the summer as a Nazi SS soldier while displaying pictures of Anne Frank around the room in Berlin. The city of Frankfurt said that he was one of the most notable anti-Semites. He also, in 2010, in a series of concerts, had an inflatable pig, which portrayed a money sign, the Star of David, on the inflatable pig, which plays to, tropes about Jews being obsessed with money and Jews being swine, which is, I don't think we have to get into the history of that. You have Rafat Alarir, who is a professor at the University of Gaza, who tweeted, "Are all Jews evil? Of course they are." I want to note, not Zionists, not Israeli. Are all Jews evil? Of course they are. You have Susan Abu Hala, the program director, who, if you go onto her Twitter, you can see her in her office with pictures of convicted terrorists. I mean, I can keep going if you want.
And just to clarify, many of these people came to Penn, right? Someone paid for their airfare, right? They were there in person in many cases.
Yeah. The only person that I'm aware of that did not actually physically attend Penn, although he did end up driving next to campus, was Roger Waters.
I understand the university revoked his invitation. Okay, we won't get into it.
Wait, that's just not what happened. He was never going to come speak in person, and then that was never the plan. And then when the outcry happened, he then decided to speak in person 2 days ahead of the festival. And then Penn said, we have not prepared for you to come to campus. Like, the original plan was that you wouldn't be coming to campus, and we're going to stick to that original plan. But like I said, with misleading things, again, another example that they've misled people to think that he was disinvited from campus as an act of good faith. In fact, the festival encouraged him to come after they heard about the outcry about him.
And AL, how many students were and faculty, or how many people were present at this literature festival?
I have no clue. I was scared to even go close to the fact. Like some of these speakers are like known defenders of like PFLP members and have gone like on the record saying, you know, like Jews are not like. I did not want to get close to this event, and I know a lot of other Jewish students were very, very scared to go to this event. And mind you, this event, the first day was the day after the Hillel was broken into, and a week after a swastika was spray painted on campus, and the Chabad was vandalized 2 days after the event concluded.
That I didn't.
And it's been concluded, I think, that you can't draw a connection between each individual event. I've been at Penn for over 2 years. I've never even heard of one of these events happening, let alone 3 in the span of 10 days. Like, I'm not going to go against what's being said, but like, I think people should know the timeline and the history, and they can draw their own conclusions.
Right. So you don't know how many people were present at the event?
I don't know, because
there were many separate events.
Yeah,
right?
there were many.
It wasn't just a single event.
Oh, okay. At the festival, how was it? A big audience, small audience?
I believe they oversold their I think they oversold their tickets. I don't know. And I want to say that I was originally planning on going to the event. You mentioned I'm a modern Middle East studies major. I pride myself on listening to every perspective. And there were some very cool speakers that were coming to campus, like very renowned Palestinian poets who I would have loved to hear speak. But I'm not supporting an event which knowingly invites Roger. Like, with some of the other speakers, I guess if you dig on their Twitters enough, you can kind of come up with anti-Semitic things that they've said. But whoever invited Roger Waters knew what they were doing. He is not a renowned Palestinian poet. He is a renowned anti-Semite, and they knew what they were doing. So I just want to make that clear, is that I am not against the festival happening. I am against the organizers who openly, knowingly invited anti-Semitic speakers, and the anti-Semitic speakers which came to Penn without a notice to the student body saying these are anti-Semitic speakers coming to Penn, not saying they're poets, they're artists. No, these are anti-Semites that defend terrorism.
And was there any anti-Semitism expressed during the festival? Do you know about that?
So I again didn't go, but from my understanding, there was a lot of tropes, including like blood libel tropes. Like, for instance, Mohammed El-Kurd, who has a long history of anti-Semitism. He's I think the only person who has their own dedicated ADL page. And he actually spoke at Penn in the spring, and I attended his talk because it was about what they said it was about. It was about Palestinian resistance, and I wanted to hear from these people who have a much different perspective than me. His entire speech was as if he had just read Hitler's Red Book and then wrote his speech right after. I mean, he literally said that, he goes, Jews are burning tires in Palestinian villages. I'm not going to make the connection, but you can see the picture that I'm painting, referring to Kristallnacht, comparing Jews to Nazis. He went on, there was a group of 4, I think, Jewish students with kippahs in the back of the room. They did not say a word, not a single word the entire event. They didn't have signs, they didn't have Israeli flags. They literally had kippahs. That's it. The entire time he was staring at them, and after every speech would go, I would love the hecklers to start speaking because I will destroy you. Every time he spoke, he was antagonizing them and trying to elicit some sort of response, which he wouldn't get. And the entirety, he's making comparisons to blood libels. And he's tweeted this. He's tweeted, Israelis have an unquenchable thirst for Palestinian blood, which is clearly a blood libel. He said, there's no wonder that people don't speak up as for Palestinians as much as they do other minority groups. because people want jobs at law firms and banks. What is that playing into? All Jews are money hungry. I mean, like, I find it hard to not see the connection between what he said. Like, it's just so clearly painted. I don't know. I find it somewhat amusing.
Can we talk about before the festival? You met with the vice provost for University Life. I've seen the really well-documented material that you took to him. I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position. You're still a student. Can you just kind of give us what he said to you that you can share? And then I want to talk briefly about how we alums tried to have this festival not stop but tone down unsuccessfully. So start with the vice provost for University Life.
Yeah, and first off, I'm a student, but I mean, I'm happy to speak my mind, and I also want to make it clear, I love Penn. I mean, there's a very strong Jewish community at Penn. It's just the response to the minority who are anti-Semitic, and I want to make that, like, I would happily send my kids here. I would happily speak very well of the school under any other circumstance. So I just want to preface with that. My meeting with Karu Kazuma, the vice provost of, I believe, Student Life at Penn, I think it went well in terms of kind of expressing the resounding and overwhelming feelings of students of Jewish and non-Jewish backgrounds on campus. And I think what it did was kind of open the eyes of the administration to the emotions behind what Jewish students were saying. He was very receptive of what I was saying and the concerns of myself and, the hundreds of other signatories on the letter. I would have liked to see an actual response from the administration, which didn't happen. But I would say that he was very receptive, and very cordial and very nice. And it was funny enough, he actually attended Middlebury College, where I transferred from. So that was a good icebreaker about anti-Semitism. But yeah, I mean, I think a more, and we don't have to talk about this, I think a more interesting topic is the response from the departments when I sent them the letter, because that was a little bit different of a story.
Okay, Noah, go ahead and tell us that part.
So I sent my letter, and the other Jewish students' letter.
Okay, let's just clarify, because I have it right here. How many signatures are on it?
I believe 207 or 213. A few were added after the fact, so I don't know.
Oh, okay. I have 204, so you might be added more. Okay.
So I sent that 4 days, Monday, the festival was Friday, 4 days before the festival, to anyone in the administration, in terms of like deans, the president's office, the vice dean, the vice pro, etc.
Wait, I want to make it very clear. It wasn't just signatures. It was this very well put together explaining how anti-Semitic the various people are, with exact examples, not just saying it word of mouth. Okay, so you sent this document. Let's call it a document.
Yeah, so I sent it on Monday, so 4 days before the event. And on Thursday, so the day that the Hillel event had occurred, I had not a single response from any departments. And this is not just one person in each department. I would say the average number of people in each department that I sent it to was 3. So there were 3 people from each department, like give or take. One had 2, one had 4, just depending on. Not a single response in 3 days. Mind you, this is over 200 students' voices saying, quote, "We are terrified." No response for 3 days from professors. My professors, most of them give me a 24-hour rule. If I don't respond in 24 hours, then, there's a problem. 3 days and 200 students. So I send a follow-up email on Thursday saying, you guys are ignoring this letter, but you can't ignore this letter when the Hillel incident happened today. It just doesn't work like that. You can't just ignore.
Can you clarify that Hillel was broken into and vandalized? Okay, keep going.
And so I get a response from the Sims department, and I think the most notable and interesting thing about the
Wait,
Sims
which department? Say that.
and media studies department.
Okay.
So first off, they agreed that some of the speakers were probably not suitable for a poetry event. But what they said more interestingly is that they weren't aware of a lot of the speakers that were coming to campus. They were asked to co-sponsor an event, give them a grant, and then were not made aware of the speakers that were coming to campus. It's almost as if you were writing an essay. You give the thesis of the essay to the professor. They say, okay, you're approved to write this essay. And then you write the essay, and it has nothing to do with what the thesis is about. Because the thesis is a literature festival. The body paragraphs of a lot of the pages are anti-Semitism. But I was happy that the Sims department did at least acknowledge the fact that some of the speakers were anti-Semitic. The Middle East Center, on the other hand, fully just ignored any of the, did not address a single, there's, like you said, Phyllis, there's a listed speaker impact, did not address a single speaker on the event and said, this is not a real violence. It's almost a symbolic of violence, which I don't agree with either. You have nothing to be afraid of. And it was obviously it was longer. I'm giving the spark notes here. And I was in shock reading this. I'm a Middle East Studies major. I am writing an honors thesis for the Middle East Studies department. Are you kidding me? Like, how do you just not address back to the paper analogy? It's like comments being put on that paper and then me going, I don't notice any comments on the paper. Like you have a sentence missing. No, it's not. It's not missing. Like it's just not true. It's just not true. And so my response was, it's no wonder, and this is a true thing, from the year of 2019 to 2022, a total of 3 Jews graduated with the Modern Middle East Studies major. 3 Jews from the years of 2019 to 2022. That should tell you something.
Right. But what should it tell for those of us who aren't?
It should tell that maybe you're neglecting your Jewish students and a little bit biased towards one side of a conflict when we're not even talking about the conflict. Nowhere in that entire letter did I mention the Israeli-Palestinian conflict at all. I mentioned Roger Waters, who is not Palestinian. And if the justification, which is what I've heard from a lot of people, is that these people have experienced so many tragedies that this is the only way they know how to express it, if that's the justification, I'm going to give in for a second and say, okay, I agree with you. That's the justification. They should be allowed to speak. Mohammed El-Kurd, who grew up in the West Bank, should be allowed to speak, despite him saying Israelis have an unquenchable thirst for blood because it's justified. Whatever. Why is it that a 70-year-old white former rock punk artist who is British has any right to speak out against Jews? Any right whatsoever. Any right. Why does Mark Lamont Hill, who tweets that a terrorist who served multiple life sentences for the murder of 30 innocent civilians is, quote, a legend? It just doesn't make sense. I listened to Roger Waters talk because it was on Zoom, so I didn't have to go to the event. He openly said, I don't know much about Palestinian literature. That was within the first 5 minutes of him talking. I don't know much about Palestinian literature. Then why are you talking about Palestinian literature? Like, seriously, like, it's just dishonest. It's just dishonest. It's portraying something that is just not that way. I would honestly prefer if the event was just called a hate fest. I would be way less opposed to this event if it was just called what it is. Let's call a spade a spade. Like, it's not, to me, it's not that hard. And then I just want to note the last thing is that the NELC department, the Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations department, they didn't respond after fully 14 days, 5 follow-up emails. It took me reaching out to the vice provost who immediately emailed the NELC department saying, yeah, I don't want to say what he said, but probably like, you owe these students a response to something that was sent by over 200 students. And I know for a fact it was only sent because he was the one who did something, because on the communication, he was CC'd on the communication. He had not been on any other communications between me and the chairs, or he was not on the email to the president originally. So they only responded because an administrator had to get involved. And this response was potentially the biggest joke I've ever seen. It was appalling. Like, it was saying that in the coming months ahead, we're reviewing our policies to see, to reflect internally on what this department sponsors. Okay. First off, if your department has to reflect upon sponsoring something, there was probably an issue in the first place. This isn't the first time the NELC department has sponsored an event. It's the first time they sponsored an event with anti-Semites, but it's not the first time they sponsored an event. Number two, again, just utter lack of addressing what the central question is. And the fourth follow-up email, I literally say, what I'm asking is, do you condemn some of the anti-Semitic speakers which were listed in the original letter or not? That's it. I want the information to be present so that Jewish students during course selection can understand where they will and will not be protected. And number two, that letter and the immediate response from the Jewish community was before the festival started. Why in the coming months ahead are you reviewing policies on something that you sponsored 2 weeks ago? You had ample time to research people that were on that list. Ample time. So number one, you researched them and you didn't care, or you just don't want to admit that potentially you messed up.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a long response.
No, but it's fine, except that knowing some of the insides, and Evelyn and I have spoken to someone who told us that they knew about this event in August before even the university knew. And I have been told by someone very connected, different person, that it was considered a bait and switch. Again, that people were asked to sponsor it without really being told. And the university insisted that it was not sponsoring it, which drove me crazy, because if you allow people to have events on your campus, how can you say you're not sponsoring it? So why were we all unsuccessful? And I mean, all of us, the alums. Evelyn and I have interviewed the head of Alums for Campus Fairness, and a few weeks ago, Abby Gordon. And, those of us didn't just sign a petition. There was a lot of back channels saying this is not right to have these speakers. Now, I'm not saying cancel the festival, it's particular speakers, as I understand it. I just don't understand how Penn could sanction it. I'm just still in shock.
Yeah, I want to make two things clear. Number one, we were not unsuccessful, in my opinion. This brought national attention to these people. And as American Jews who have the privilege of living in the US and not having to deal with what's transpiring in Israel, I'm 21. If I was in Israel right now, I would be in uniform either on the Gazan, West Bank, or Lebanese border. I can speak up. Anyone in the US who is Jewish can speak up. You're not putting your life on the line. You're putting your voice on the line, which is, potentially more powerful. Number two is there's two groups who are most disadvantaged by hosting the Palestine Rights Literature Festival with the current speakers. It was the Jewish community and the Palestinian community. Because I know a lot of Palestinians at Penn who were pissed off about the event happening. And they were pissed off about the event happening with speakers like Roger Waters. Because in their minds, They're there to celebrate their culture and their heritage. Why, again, is a 7-year-old white British dude celebrating their literature when he has nothing to do with it? And similarly, I'd be mad if there was a Jewish literature festival and some guy who is just not Jewish has done nothing, like just so irrelevant, detracting from my ability to celebrate my heritage. I would be pissed off. And that is what happened from a lot of Palestinians on Penn's campus. The second group is Jews who felt like they had no support. I don't expect on any college campus across the country, across the world, within or from without Israel. And we can see that in Israel, right? Anti-Semitism. Israel is considered to be a haven for Jews across the world. Whenever I go there, it's a haven for me. What we witness today is that it's not a haven. No matter where Jews occupy space, there will always be hate. Always be hate. What changes is the response to that hate. That is what matters. I don't expect at any point in my life to not be in a space where someone doesn't like me because I'm Jewish, unless I'm going to shul, unless I'm going to synagogue. What matters is the response when that hate is brought to people's attention in positions of power. And that's what I think Penn failed to do, is they had an opportunity to say that we allow freedom of speech at Penn, but Penn University, University of Pennsylvania, condemns the speakers and holds accountable the organizers of the event who undermined 3 departments on campus, the university, the Palestinian students, and the Jewish students. That is what needs to happen. Not the event being canceled, not saying we can't have more Palestinian literature, any sort of festival for Palestinians on campus. If that happens, I will be right back here, if you allow me, condemning the fact that they're not being allowed to do that. But what we do need to have is academic honesty on campus, presenting things like they are. Because for me, in a classroom with these professors who sponsored the event, if I took the executive director, Susan Abuhala's class, and I ChatGPT'd the entire paper, I would be suspended from school on academic dishonesty, on plagiarism. Why are you not holding your professors to the same standard that you're holding your students? It is objectively true that there was dishonesty surrounding this festival because the Sims department openly said they were not aware of some of the speakers. That is not the integrity that I expect from my professors. And I know it's not the integrity that most students on campus expect from their professors. Be honest, represent the facts as they are, and treat your students with an iota of respect to call out hate and to not fool them into thinking that this is a poetry event when you have speakers like Roger Waters.
Evelyn, do you have a question?
What is your advice, Eyal, to students at other universities who may face similar events on their campuses?
I think that's a great question. I think it's a tough one too. And my answer is definitely not going to be the holy grail of anything. I would say that when I went to Middlebury and I was a freshman, I was really scared to put my name on things and really scared of the lashback that I was going to get. I had a single and I made one of my, not made, but strongly encouraged and asked my friends to sleep in my room with me because I was really scared. As a senior leaving college, you don't want to have any regrets for not defending something that you believe in. Next semester, I have course selection. I still have to take a Middle East Studies class to graduate. Like I said, there are 2 people in the Middle East Studies department. Both of them were on the email calling them out. I am very scared about my grade, but if I were to do everything over again, I would not change a single thing. When something's important, you have to stand by it. And I always lead back to the fact that if I was not in the United States and I was in Israel as a Jew, I would be in uniform putting my life on the line. I and everyone else is and are capable of speaking up against hate. If you don't want to make a statement about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that's fine. During this entire podcast, I did not make a statement about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I spoke about anti-Semitism. And the only people that conflate that are anti-Semites who want you to be silent by saying that you're just supporting whatever they describe the Israeli government. They're trying to silence you so that you can't speak about anti-Semitism, and it's terrible. And you need to speak up. Everyone needs to speak up about it because it's not going to stop until they do. It's just like the objective truth is it will not stop. And students are terrified. Like I want to make that so clear to everyone. Like students are terrified. The DP didn't publish the letter because the names were anonymized on the letter. And that is because a lot of students texted me saying, I'm not putting my name on the letter unless it goes nowhere, that they are not willing to put their names on it. And when I asked why, it was because they didn't want their grades to be impacted. They were fearful of physical threats, and they were fearful of any other sort of retaliation against them. And it's not a fake fear. It's not like I was like, oh, that's ridiculous. They're right. They're 100% right. Like, it's just, it's so terrible because it shouldn't just be Jews standing up against this sort of hate. It shouldn't be like, I think anyone with eyes and a conscience and a moral code can see the harm in dressing up as a Nazi SS soldier and having Anne Frank projected around the room at a rock concert in Berlin, of all places. Anyone can see that. And I at least believe that the vast majority of humans are morally correct and have a very good ethics code. And I know for a fact that if enough people speak out, that you will have the majority on your side. After all of this, all that I've received at least is positive. It's genuinely positive, and seeing the support and how tight knitted and connected the Jewish community is, and just like how happy it is, honestly. Like the amount of jokes that I've heard about stuff like this is crazy. But even in times of the darkness that we've witnessed, Jews are always able to crack a joke, keep a smile on their face, which is really beautiful to see. And a joke, I want to mention one of those jokes. One of the jokes was someone asked someone like, have you heard of everything that's going on in Israel? Have you been reading about it? And the response was, why would I have to read about it? I can just wait for the next Palestinian Literature Rights Festival to hear some of these people come to campus as poets, but talk about the massacre of Jews that occurred. It's the reality, and unless people fight it, then it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, I prophesy that you're going to have a really wonderful adult career because you are so articulate and you're willing to speak up. You understand the risks, but you understand how to weigh them, how to get other people to be understanding and on your side. This has been an amazing interview. We really, really appreciate it. We appreciate our listeners who will tune into it. For those of you who want to know more about Evelyn and myself and our other projects, you can go to Never Again Is Now podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And as we end every single episode, which really says what y'all just said, is we say, please, without putting yourself in physical harm, speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.